On a quiet suburban street in Frederick, Colorado, a man stood in front of cameras asking for his family to come home. His voice sounded calm, almost rehearsed. He said he was torn up inside, that his wife and daughters were everything to him. But within days, that same man would be exposed for something no one saw coming. His pregnant wife, his 2 little girls, gone. And the truth behind that calm face, it was far darker than anyone expected. This wasn't just a disappearance, it was a story of deception, timing, and a reality that unraveled fast. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into what was really happening behind closed doors. From the outside, everything about this family looked stable. Christopher Watts and Shanann married in 2012 and later moved to Frederick, Colorado, building what seemed like a normal life with their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste. By 2018, Shanann was also 15 weeks pregnant with their 3rd child, a boy they planned to name Nico. They lived in a 5-bedroom home, and their daily life followed a routine shaped by work, parenting, and social media updates that showed smiling moments and family milestones. Chris worked long hours as an operator in the oil field, often starting his day early around 5:15 a.m, while Shanann managed things at home and built her own business. On the surface, it looked balanced, but behind that image, pressure was building. In 2015, the couple filed for bankruptcy, with total debts reported at over $400,000. Monthly expenses, including a mortgage close to $3,000, added constant strain. Even with those challenges, the public image never changed. Online, they still appeared happy and connected. That contrast between what people saw and what was actually happening quietly grew wider over time. But behind that carefully built image, something had already started to fall apart. By mid-2018, things had shifted in a way no one could see at first. In June, Chris Watts began an extramarital relationship with a co-worker. What started quietly didn't stay that way for long. By early July, the relationship had become serious, with the 2 meeting frequently, sometimes up to 5 times a week, going on dates, and even travelling together. To keep this hidden, Chris built a second version of his life. He told her he was already separated and even claimed he didn't have children. He deleted messages, hid photos, and kept his communications secret. At the same time, his behaviour at home began to change. The communication between him and Shanann became shorter, colder, and distant. Shanann started noticing it. In late July, she messaged friends about how different things felt, trying to understand what was going wrong while managing her pregnancy and daily responsibilities. By early August, the situation became more direct. Chris told her they were not compatible anymore and avoided any effort to fix the relationship. While one life was quietly falling apart, another one was being planned in the background. And those 2 paths were getting closer to colliding. And by the time Shanann came back home that night, the situation was already past the point of saving. In the early hours of August 13th, 2018, Shanann Watts returned home at approximately 1:48 a.m. after a business trip. Just a few hours later, before sunrise, everything shifted. Around 5 a.m, as Chris prepared to leave for work, a serious argument began inside their home. It wasn't just another disagreement. This time it centered around his affair and his desire to end the marriage. Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant, reacted strongly. The conversation quickly escalated, filled with tension that had been building for weeks. During that moment, Chris later admitted he strangled her in their bedroom. What makes this even more unsettling is what happened next. Their 4-year-old daughter Bella woke up and walked into the room asking what was going on. Instead of stopping or calling for help, Chris continued with a series of decisions that would change everything. He described feeling shaken, but also said his life had completely changed in that moment. There was no pause, no second thought that stopped him. Within minutes, the situation had gone from a private argument to something far more serious. And it didn't end there. But what happened next is what turned this from shocking into something deeply disturbing. After the events inside the house, the next steps happened quickly. Around 5:27 a.m, Chris Watts began loading his truck in the driveway, a moment later captured on a neighbour's security camera. He placed Shanann's body, wrapped in a sheet, into the vehicle. At the same time, his 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, were still with him. Shortly after, he left the house and began driving toward a remote oil site where he worked. GP's data later showed he departed around 5:46 a.m. and arrived at the location at approximately 6:33 a.m, covering a distance of about 40 miles. The drive itself lasted under an hour, but what happened during and after it would define the case. During this time, he made further decisions that showed a clear shift from panic to control. The situation was no longer about a single moment. It had become a sequence of deliberate actions, carried out step by step without interruption. By the time he reached the site, the quiet isolation of that location gave him the space to continue without anyone around. There were no witnesses, no interruptions, and no immediate questions. And when he reached that remote site, he made decisions that shocked even seasoned investigators. At the Cervi 31119 oil site, after arriving around 6:33 a.m, Chris Watts carried out a series of actions that took time and planning. Shanann's body was placed in a shallow grave roughly 30 feet from two large oil tanks. He used basic tools and his hands to cover the site, leaving it concealed in an area he was familiar with. Then came the part that made this case especially disturbing. The two children were placed inside separate crude oil tanks. Each tank had a narrow opening, only about 8 inches wide, making the process difficult and deliberate. The entire sequence reportedly took close to 2 hours before he moved on with his normal work routine. And that's what stands out. After everything, he continued his day as if nothing had happened. No immediate signs of panic, no sudden disappearance, just routine. But back at home, things were already starting to feel wrong. Shanann missed a scheduled appointment around 9 a.m, something that was not typical for her. Calls went unanswered. Messages stayed unread. What started as silence quickly turned into concern, and that concern didn't stay quiet for long. But while he tried to act normal, the situation at home was already raising serious questions. By early afternoon on August 13, concern had already turned into action. Around 12:10 p.m, Shanann's friend went to the house after she missed both a medical appointment and messages, something completely out of character. When there was no response at the door, police were contacted and a welfare check was carried out at approximately 1:40 p.m. Inside the home, the situation didn't make sense. Shanann's purse was still there, along with her keys and medication. Her phone was found inside the house and her car was parked in the garage with the children's car seats still in place. These were not signs of someone leaving voluntarily. Chris Watts returned home and spoke with officers, appearing calm and cooperative. He said he last saw his wife early that morning and believed she had left with the children. Later, he went even further, making public pleas. Standing outside his home, he asked for his family to come back, saying he just wanted them home safely. On the surface, it sounded convincing, but the details didn't line up. The story stayed the same, but the evidence inside the house told a very different story. And the more he talked, the more things just didn't add up. As the search continued into August 14 and 15, the focus slowly shifted. The timeline Chris Watts gave didn't match what was being uncovered. He said he last saw his family around 5:15 a.m, but other details around his movements that morning began raising doubts. His behaviour, calm at first, started to stand out more as pressure increased. On August 15, he agreed to take a polygraph test. The results showed clear signs of deception. After that, the questioning became more direct. For hours, he held on to his story, repeating that he had nothing to do with the disappearance. But as inconsistencies were pointed out, his version began to change. At one point, he admitted to being responsible for Shanann's death, though he initially gave a different explanation for how events unfolded. That version didn't hold for long. As the conversation continued, more details came out and the truth started to take shape. Soon after, he directed authorities to a remote oil site connected to his work. That decision changed everything. What had been a missing persons case quickly became something else entirely. But even after confessing, the full truth was still more disturbing than anyone expected. After leading authorities to the site, the full picture came into focus. Chris Watts eventually admitted to killing Shanann and later acknowledged that he was responsible for the deaths of his daughters as well. What began as shifting stories ended in a complete confession, with details that showed the events were not just a single moment, but a chain of actions. As more information came out, certain factors became clear. In the weeks before August 13, he had been deeply involved in an affair and had already started planning a different life. Later, in letters, he claimed the plan had been forming for weeks. The desire to leave his marriage, combined with pressure and conflict, became part of the motive behind what happened. In November 2018, he pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including first-degree murder and unlawful termination of a pregnancy. Just weeks later, he was sentenced to 5 life terms without the possibility of parole, along with additional years for related charges. Even today, the case stands out because of how ordinary everything looked on the surface, right until the truth came out. In the end, the mask Chris Watts wore during those initial media pleas didn't just slip, it shattered once he stepped into an interrogation room and failed a polygraph test. By the time he was handed 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, the perfect life he had curated was exposed as a hollow lie built on debt, a reckless affair, and a cold-blooded betrayal. Today, Watts remains in a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, reportedly spending his time writing letters to the outside world while surrounded by photos of the family he destroyed. It's a haunting reminder that the people we think we know best can sometimes be the ones hiding the deadliest secrets. What do you think? Was Chris Watts a man who broke under the pressure of a double life? Or was the loving father just a role he played until it no longer served him? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss our next video. Stay safe.